housekeeping. So, as I say, welcome to the Submitting Competitive Application webinar for the Fulbright Postgraduate Awards for the 2027-28 cycle. Before we get started, a little bit of housekeeping. So I am recording this webinar. It will be uploaded to our YouTube channel post the weekend, and then it will be sent out to everyone who attended this webinar as a link, and we'll also host it on our website, so you should be able to watch it at any point afterwards. So that means if you need to dash off for anything, or if there's any information here that you wish to return to, you will have that option. So please make use of this throughout the application process if you need to. We'll also be answering any of your questions today. So I would encourage you, if you have questions, to use the Q&A box rather than the chat box. So make sure you're using that. And then finally, if you need the captions, please do turn them on and make use of those. But also we note that automated captions aren't always the best. So it may struggle to deal with some of what I say, but hopefully it will still give you a clear idea of what is being said today. So as I said, I'm joined by a panel who will have introduced themselves. So my name's Sam. I'm the Senior Program Manager for UK Awards. I'm joined by Abby, who is our Program Officer for our UK Awards here at the Fulbright Commission as well. And I'm joined by two of our current UK postgraduate students who are out in the US at the moment, Roa and Tia, who I will hand over to introduce themselves and tell you all a little bit about what they're studying and where they are in the US. So Roa, why don't we start with you?
Hi everyone, my name is Roa. I'm a first year MPP student at Harvard, so I'm doing a master's in public policy, and I'm currently based in Cambridge, Massachusetts.
Great, I'll go. My name's Tia. I am a Fulbright student at the University of Chicago. I'm studying on a master's program called the Master of Arts program in Social Sciences. It is a 9-month kind of short program. So yeah, I'm currently in Chicago at the moment.
Thank you. So what are we going to cover today? We're going to talk through all of the stages of the application and ways that you might approach this process. So we're going to cover getting started, getting to know the application itself, some pre-application strategy, some tips and tricks for writing your application, and then also navigating the different placement options that are available to you as a Fulbright applicant, and then head into some Q&A as well. Feel free to get your questions in now. For some questions, we may answer them in text form, but we will try and get to as many questions as possible today. However, if your question is very, very specific to your situation, you're going to have much more success emailing us. So try and make sure your questions are a little bit broader today if you do have questions. So in terms of getting started, the first thing I want to emphasize is that it's not too late. We still have over a month right now until the deadline. So while you may be having to do things a little bit quicker than some other people who've already got a start, a month is plenty of time to complete this application. And we'll encourage you to be strategic in the way that you approach that final month, but you do have time to complete an application. Next up, when it comes to getting started, I will encourage everyone to read the instructions. So we have a document up on our website that is the Fulbright UK country-specific instructions. And these are instructions for filling out the application from the UK. And the reason that we have these is that the Fulbright program is a global program, and the online application system is for the global program. So not everything in that application system is going to apply to people applying from the UK. And we may also be asking for some additional pieces of the application that are different as well. This means that what you're going to need to do is make sure you're following our instructions instead of just the information on the application form if you hope for your application to be considered complete and eligible. So if you take one single piece of advice from today, it's make sure you read that instruction document. Hopefully there will be lots of other useful things within the session for you, but make sure you are reading those instructions. Everything you need to succeed in this process is contained in there. Next up, I'm going to encourage you to use your time well. Like I said, there is only a month left for the application process, and you want to make sure you're using that time as best as possible. So if you're thinking about applying now, maybe reach out to the people that are going to be your referees now, letting them know that you're applying and what your study objective and plan is, so that they can write your references ahead of time instead of emailing them a day or two before the deadline and hoping that they're going to be able to write something for you over a bank holiday weekend. Because if you don't have those references attached to your application, it will be ineligible and we won't be able to move forward with it. So that's a great example of using your time well. I'd also recommend making a list. Think about all the things that you need within your application, keep a track of those, and make sure you're ticking them off as you go. This will make sure that your application is actually complete, but also that you're keeping focused on the task at hand. Access all of the information on our website, go back to our introductory webinar to the process, look at some of our alumni pages, see the kinds of things that people use their awards for. There's lots of information out there. There's also Education USA information, which you'll find very useful as well, talking about US postgraduate education in general. Use all of this. It's free and it's there for you to use, so make sure you're taking advantage of it. And then be strategic. This is a very competitive process, and there are ways of making yourself more competitive within it. So think about how it is that you're going to navigate this process with a sense of strategy. So the first thing to familiarize yourself with is what the application process looks like. So right now you're engaged in what we call the written application. This is done online and is done through the application form that's linked within our application instructions and our website. So you'll need to complete an online application form. You'll also need to complete a supplemental form. This is linked again within our instructions and on the website. If you received a 2-2 for your undergraduate degree, you will need to complete a 2-2 supplemental form as well. The link for this is included, but that is considered an important part of your application. Then, if your application is successful, you will be shortlisted for interview. And then after the interview, successful candidates will be offered an award. So whilst all shortlisted candidates are interviewed, there's no guarantee of shortlisting once you submit an application. Only the top performing applications will be shortlisted for interview. So what makes up the written application? The written application includes a CV, a reflective essay, a study objective, a personal statement, 3 letters of recommendation or reference, and that's what makes up the complete application form. We also have the supplemental form that we would ask you to fill out as well. So I want to talk a little bit about pre-application strategy. This means researching Fulbright, researching the universities, and then also thinking about the award that you might apply for. So there are many awards, or not many, but there are multiple awards available from Fulbright for you to apply to, but you can only apply to one award each cycle. So that means you're going to want to make the choice that's right for you and potentially the choice that gives you the best opportunity when applying. So we have our partner awards. There's a couple of examples there, the one with American University in Washington, D.C., and our award with the University of Maryland School of Public Policy. These are a couple of examples. There are some other awards that are discipline specific or other awards at different universities. So be sure to familiarize yourself with those and look at the opportunities that are contained within. We talked through all of these in our last webinar, so I won't go through them in detail now. But because of the specificity of these awards, very often they mean that there is a smaller application pool. So you may be raising your chances of being shortlisted if you're submitting a compelling application within these awards. However, even if these awards don't apply to you, there is still the opportunity to apply, but you will be applying through our All Disciplines Award, which is a much broader award category, which means there are more people applying. And I think one of the things that's going to help you at the very start of this is making sure you have a very clear understanding of why it is you want to apply to the US, why it is that the Fulbright program is the correct avenue to apply through, and which universities you are considering if you're going through the self-placed program, and if you're going through the IIE placed program, why the IIE placement route is correct for you. Take your time. be open-minded with your research and be broad about it. Those Education USA resources are going to be helpful for you as well. So make sure you're taking the time to read through things and do some research online. There's plenty of useful information out there. University websites are a great place to start. There's also some really useful university search engines out there as well. Some other places you might look are the Fulbright documentation on our website and on the Fulbright program website, the global program website. Again, country-specific instructions. Take notes on things, highlight documents that you've downloaded, do anything that you need to make sure this information is sticking and you're able to use it when you're writing your application to help shape it. Also note that we have a holistic application process. So every element of your application matters, and we're looking at it to form a complete picture or story of the applicant when we are assessing these applications. So since we've got a couple of people here who have written applications and have approached this process, I know it was a long time ago now, and there's been a lot since then, like university applications and all of the work that you've been doing during your first year on these programs. But if you cast your mind back, what was your approach before you even opened the application form in terms of thinking about what it is you wanted to do, why, and how you were going to start this task?
I can go first. When I think I started my application around like the end of February, so not too far from where we are now. And I think I just sat and thought, I knew I wanted to do a master's. I knew my research interests. I knew from people, I knew that studying in the US is a great opportunity. And honestly, I didn't know too much specifically about the like specific university that I wanted to go to. So in the US. So I think my starting point was kind of sitting down, writing a list of yeah, my research interests, what I wanted to get out of a master's, and then try to kind of piece it together. As Sam said, like I can't remember what it's called, the US the website with the resources on there about studying in the US. That was really, really helpful for me. Um, So yeah, kind of pieced everything together and then looked at what is required from the Fulbright application and tried to kind of make everything as cohesive as possible. So one piece of advice I do have is that um, there is a lot to the application. It's a long process getting everything together, but it's very rewarding and kind of putting that effort in the beginning. I came back to my materials, my application materials, so many times. I still do, to kind of see like what it was that I wanted to get out of this. So yeah, I think kind of looking at the different elements that are required and making your application kind of cohesive and tell that story of what your research interests are, what your experience has been, how those two relate, and then what you want to do in the US and what you want to get out of that experience. So yeah, I think like a kind of cohesive story across them, but also keep in mind that there are word limits and you want to get the most out of like each element, so not be repeating yourself across the different documents. Yeah, I think I'll leave it there.
Really helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, very similar to Tia. So I knew that I wanted to do a master's in the US, but for me, like the funding was like a big constraint. So my deadline for my master's program was December. So like a year before I started looking into like master's programs, I was like looking at all the information like on the websites, like on the application websites. So I kind of made a list of like the things that I need to prepare for my master's programs. And like for my program, I had to do like some standardized testing. So I kind of did that ahead of time. And I think that like the Fulbright actually only came into like onto my radar like for February, March. So I was like very late into the process because I started my application fairly late, and which is something I do regret because it put me under a lot of stress, and it put my recommenders under a lot of stress. Because I was like frantically messaging them to try and get things yeah, done in time. So I would definitely not do that if I could go back in time. Because yeah, it's just it's not I think when you're applying to a master's program and also the Fulbright, which is such a lengthy like application process, you just need like some clarity and some space to like think about it and make some good decisions. And so I would just say give yourself as much time as possible. I will say that so the Fulbright document that like has all the things that you need to look at, it's quite long. I think I read that like almost memorized it because there were so many things on it. So I definitely like recommend just going over it as many times as you can, just to make sure that you aren't missing anything. And it's very clear what you need to include in your application. I knew that I wanted to do a master's in public policy, so I like with my focus being health policy, given like my professional background. Um, so I was looking at like schools that, had like good public policy programs, but also specifically like healthcare, like a healthcare component. And I think that really narrowed down my search because like there are many schools in the US that focus on healthcare policy within their public policy programs. And I think that made things easier for me because I had like a short list of like a very few schools that I would want to go to and could get like, yeah, could achieve the research interest that I had. Um, I also spoke to a lot of like if you look at the website, you can obviously see like the previous awardees, like for the Fulbright program. So I'd reached out to a few who were like at the universities that I was looking at going into. And that was really helpful just to kind of give me like an idea about like culture and fit, and kind of narrow down what schools I'd be better suited to. And I think another thing I also looked at schools that had generous like financial aid because like with the Fulbright there is like a limit to how much you can get. And I don't know like I think I just wanted to like make sure that if I did get an offer, like cost wouldn't stop me from attending. So I wanted to like and in addition to the Fulbright, I wanted schools that would also be able to offer me some financial support. So that would like played a big part in how I selected the schools that I was interested in applying to. And similar to Tia, like even now, I still go back and look at like the essays that I wrote for my Fulbright application, especially when I'm like now in the process of applying for like summer internships. And it really like has really helped me just kind of like go back to like what I really intended to get out of the Fulbright program, of my master's program, and kind of just keep me focused, especially because there are so once you get here, there are so many opportunities you kind of get pulled in so many different directions, and it's helped me just kind of stay true to like what I initially set out to do. And that's been really helpful and grounding and just like keeping me on like the right path, I think. So yeah.
I want to pick up on something you talked about reaching out to former Fulbrighters and another route that interested applicants might consider in terms of getting that information is I'm sure both of you may have encountered this in US culture now that you've been there for a while, that cold emailing is much more acceptable in the US. And so if you want to know more about a university, emailing their admissions office and saying, can you put me in touch with a grad student to answer some questions? Like that will actually happen in the US and you will be able to get the information straight from universities or maybe professors or other grad students. So don't be afraid to start reaching out to people. Like they will more than likely answer you, which is I think sometimes a little bit confusing to us where we're just like, why would
Yeah.
I email someone out of the blue? But it does work.
It really does. And like I found that especially when I after it, like before I'd even like got an offer, I was thinking about so with Harvard, I once you apply, you like submit your like forms for financial aid before you actually get an offer. And there were a few fellowships where you'd have to like go through an interview process. So I reached out to some students who'd already had those fellowships like the year prior, and they were incredibly helpful with like helping me just like navigate the application process for those like financial aid programs, and with interviews. And yeah, people are just so happy to help. And I think initially I just kind of felt like this is so awkward and kind of embarrassing to just like slide into somebody's like LinkedIn DMs. But it really isn't. So like there's no shame in it at all. And I think you'll find that people are more than willing to help if you put yourself out there.
This is maybe something that people haven't necessarily thought about, but I think both of you have a good insight in because you both applied alongside having full-time jobs that you were doing, did you approach your time management for the application in a specific way, or was it like a frantic after work everyday situation?
I'm happy to go. So for
Yeah,
me,
yeah.
like because I had to do my standardized testing, I had to do the GRE, like I had to start a while before. So that kind of that was I think that was challenging, like studying for the GRE alongside like working at the hospital. I think with like the application for the Fulbright, I'd actually taken like a week's worth of annual leave, and I was in Jordan at the time, and that's when I just sat down and like cracked, like did everything, and wrote actually did the writing for my essays. I just kind of spent quite a few weeks thinking about it and brainstorming whilst working. But I did take some time off just to like sit down and like write my essays and kind of be thoughtful about it. So I would say starting early, even just to think about what you want to kind of put down to paper, some themes, some ideas, and like because there's so many components to the application. There's obviously your CV, there's like the optional essay, and then like your statement of purpose and your like research objectives. I try to like highlight different aspects of my application and like myself throughout those. And I think it's really difficult to do that in like a day. So I would definitely give yourself just some time to like reflect. And I really found the process like quite, it helped me just think about like where I wanted to go in life. I think it was a really therapeutic process in a way because it's made me think about my life from like the start to like now to where I'm at, like where I want to see myself going. Um, so yeah, I think even if I didn't get the Fulbright, I would have found a lot of like I found the process going through it like super helpful and it just gave me so much more clarity about what I wanted to do, and like the impact I could have, and how I could go about doing that.
Yeah, that's really interesting because I feel exactly the same about my experience of putting together my application. I knew after finishing my undergrad, which was like 5 years before I think coming here or even starting my application, I knew I wanted to do a master's and I kind of knew what my research interest was. And then you get into full-time work and don't have the time to kind of think about the interests that you had when you were an undergrad and you had time to think and you had time to explore different academic avenues. So yeah, sitting down and really thinking, okay, like what have I done since my undergrad? What do I want to research now? And kind of fitting all of that together, and writing the materials. It was really therapeutic. It was nice and it made me think, okay, I still have these interests. And yeah, like it kind of validated for me like why I really wanted to do the masters and then also why I wanted to do it in the US and why Fulbright was a great fit. So with working full time, yeah, it was difficult fitting everything in. I remember I would block out a Saturday or a Sunday to kind of just sit and lock in and like get through things. One other thing I would really stress is get like ask people for help and ask people for support. It's a big there's a lot required and even the people providing you with recommendations. So I had meetings with they were my like tutors from my undergrad, spoke with them about like my research interests and if there was any like new papers that they could recommend or work or research that they knew about that could like help inform me writing my application. So that was helpful as in addition to them providing the recommendation for the application. Um, and also if you have friends or colleagues who you know have done a master's, done a PhD. I had help from a housemate to write my CV because I wanted my CV to be more like academic focused. So yeah, I would just stress that don't do the process alone. Ask other people for support. And again, like we've just said, if you don't have anyone around you that has done a PhD or knows this process or has applied to like postgrad education, then reach out to people. LinkedIn's great. Yeah, cold email people I have also found that people are very receptive to that here and in the UK. So yeah, don't do it alone is my main advice.
Absolutely. There's going to be, I've got a tip related to that on the coming slide when we get into like writing the longer extended writing piece of the application. But I think that is great advice. Um, so when it comes to writing things like your study objective, your personal statement, your reflective essay, read the specifications, make sure you understand what each piece of writing is asking from you and how you're going to approach it. Make a plan. I think it's really easy to be intimidated by the blank page. And it's also really easy sometimes to jump in and not really think about things and end up with a messy piece of writing. Have a plan, even if that plan is just like a few bullet points, it will guide you to a certain extent. And I think it's important to know what it is you want to use each piece of writing for. Um, our panel have highlighted the fact that there are word counts. You're not going to be able to say everything with every piece of writing. So make sure you're using these as building blocks to form out that holistic application. At some point, you are going to have to just start. And whether what you start with is sort of your scribbled stream of consciousness version and then you go back and refine, or you almost just write a throwaway draft and then plan something, getting anything on paper is going to make this task a lot less intimidating. Draft and draft again. Nothing is perfect the first time round, and I think you'll find you'll have a lot of benefit from approaching this as an iterative process. Here we are. Get advice and find resources. Talk to people. Talk to your friends. Talk to your colleagues. Talk to your family. Even if they've not been through a process like this, they will have another perspective, which will help you a lot. I also think it's really useful to have someone proofread your application. Like, yes, things like spell checkers can be useful, but they're also not reading things like a person would. And so getting ideas of like how things read, do they read clumsily? Are you making something are you writing something that is technically correct but doesn't read like how a person would write it? Is it actually conveying the message you want it to convey? Having someone else read your application with you and then offer you feedback is going to be a really helpful way of approaching this. And find resources as well, particularly when we think about things like the personal statement here and the study, or sorry, and the reflective essay. These are kinds of writing that, at least in a university application in the UK, you aren't necessarily asked to do in quite the same way. So looking at US, even undergraduate college essay guidance might help you get started when it comes to getting some ideas on paper and finding an approach to this. Take breaks. You're not going to get this done in one day. And in fact, taking a break to then come back to a piece of writing may give you a jolt of inspiration or a new look on what it is that you're trying to say and how best to communicate that. Make sure you're putting yourself in the application. It's really easy to write something that's very academic or that's very career focused, but doesn't really talk about you or your journey or what you hope to get out of this. And given that Fulbright is a cultural exchange as well as an academic one, we want to know about you and who you are and what you're bringing to this program. And then some things to consider is what's the story of the bit of writing you're doing and what lens are you approaching your journey with. And those things are also useful ways to think about your initial plan and how to get started with the writing. I know you both talked a little bit about taking time to do the writing, but was there a way that you approached each of the bits of writing? Any particular challenges that you found when doing the writing and ways that you found of, I guess, overcoming some of the hurdles on this section of the application?
I think I may have mentioned before, but about like kind of making the application cohesive and have that story running through it. That's something I tried to get at in my application. And it's very cheesy, but you want to stand out and kind of highlight that you have a unique journey to where you are now. And you want to really get across like how your experiences have informed that and what you want to go and research and then do after the master's. You really want to get across like how all of that links together. And then also so you have a vision for not just what you'll do in the US, but afterwards. That is really challenging to do. And I think kind of sitting down and giving yourself the time and the headspace to be reflective and like look back on all of the things that you've done and kind of piece them together. That is what helped me the most. So yeah, I would say give yourself the time to do that. And as I already said, ask people for help and input. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I struggled the most with the optional essay. I think just because it was like I think the prompt was like quite a vulnerable one, and I do think it's a really important essay because I think it gives like some context to like the person behind the application. So like yeah, I do think it's a really important one. I will say I think I just found it really helpful to like speak to like friends and family, like people who know me, and like running some of the ideas that I wanted to explore. And just kind of being encouraged to like just be open and honest. And I think like ultimately this is like a deeply personal application. And I think everyone's application will be very like different because of that personal component. So even if two people are applying to the same program, you won't have the same application. I would just encourage you to try um to just be as honest as you can and try to like bring out yourself in your applications. I don't like there isn't a like cookie cutter Fulbrighter. Um like anyone is like here is capable of being Fulbrighter. I just think just be yourself, be your unique self, and I think that's what really comes out. And you can only tell your story, and you can't like fabricate a story that isn't yours. And I think the story that really matters most is the one that you have to share. So I just encourage you to dig deep and bring that out.
I think all of those really excellent pieces of advice, and um, I think it is really helpful to encourage people to be honest about who they are, and where they're going with this application. And I think that's one of the things that helps people stand out the most is being able to express that part of this journey. As cliched as it sounds, like that is what sticks out about the strongest applications, is that very clear idea of, oh, I feel like I've had a conversation with the person that wrote this after reading. I'm going to talk a little bit about different placement options, and then we'll go into questions. So we have, for most of our awards, so the only ones that are excluded here are the awards with specific universities. So these are the named awards like the Maryland School of Public Policy Award, the American University Award, and others that have the name of the university in them. Those are excluded from the placement options. You have to go to the university that is named in those awards. But if you're applying to an All Disciplines Award or one of our other discipline-specific partner awards, you will go through one of our placement options. And we have two placement options. So we have the independent placement model. This is where candidates manage their university applications themselves. They will need to research the applications themselves, or research the universities themselves, and write about those universities within the application. This is ideal for candidates who have a very strong sense of which universities it is they are going to be applying for, or who are perhaps already holding offers from universities. We then have the IIE placement model. So through Fulbright, you will be paired with a placement advisor who is an expert in the higher education landscape of your field, and they will work with you to find the best academic fit and also potentially the best funding fit. And this rewards flexibility and open-mindedness. So they're very different approaches, and they will suit different students. And we've got on our panel today students who went through both routes. So do make sure to ask questions about these if you are interested. But we don't have loads of time left. So what I want to make sure that we do is get on to questions, because I'm sure we have plenty. So the last thing to say is our deadline is coming up on Tuesday, the 5th of May, and it will be at 5 p.m. UK time. So you've got like the full working day, but submit it before the deadline. There's always the risk that things go wrong. Your internet may go down, your laptop may break, your referees may not submit something in time. So set yourself an earlier deadline. I remember throughout university and whenever I have applications to do, I always make sure to set myself a deadline that is before the actual official deadline to make sure that either I'm getting it done or I've got a little bit of flexibility post that personal deadline. So make sure that you are submitting it before the 5th of May, or if you absolutely have to, on the 5th of May, but do really plan around that. Uh, I suppose what I'll do is we'll give people some time to get questions in if they haven't already. But before we open the floor to questions, I suppose, is there any like major this tip was an absolute lifesaver for me that you've not had a chance to share yet before we open the floor, or should we just head on into questions?
So I applied for like the independent placement. And I will say that the thing that I found, the like tip that I found most helpful if you are planning on applying through like the independent placement is to just be like super clear about why the specific universities you've chosen. So I think I shortlisted like about four or five, I can't remember exactly. But for each one, I had a very clear reason as to like why I was applying there and how it tied to my research interests. I think that's really helpful instead of just like listing like just generic universities. I think I think it's like a really underestimated component of the application. The universities that you're selecting, but I do think they're quite important. So yeah, that's one thing I'd mention.
And I can probably give the advice on the other side as I did the IIE placement program where the IIE support you to apply to universities once you're on the Fulbright program. So yeah, I didn't reference any specific universities in my application process, in my application materials. I actually kind of was pretty explicit about saying like I don't know a lot about this and I want that support from the IIE and that's something that I want to get out of being on the Fulbright program. So yeah, I was pretty explicit about that. I think my main bit of advice, generally this can apply to all applications as well, is be really specific about why it is the US and why you couldn't just do this master's program in the UK. Because like you probably could do the same master's program in the UK. Like I'm on a social science master's program, so that they exist outside of the US. But I need in my application, I really needed to get across why being in the US was valuable for me and what I wanted to get out of that experience in the US specifically.
Yeah, great. That's super helpful. Abby, did you want to start going through some of the questions?
Yeah. Um, so I think first off the bat, there's a number of questions um, about visiting student researcher, which I know doesn't apply to you, Tia Aroa. So Sam, you'll probably have to answer these. Um, but can you just give us a little bit more detail about applying to be for a visiting student researcher award? Specifically, how long can your visiting student research position be, and what requirements we need from a host university as a part of the application?
Yeah, of course. So for those wondering, the Visiting Student Researcher Awards are awards for students who are currently engaged in a PhD outside of the US to go and spend some period of time in the US doing research that could be field work, archive work, lab work. There's lots of different ways that this might manifest itself. These awards are offered um, as all disciplines awards and strictly through the independent placement track. We would expect these students to do the research on where it is they want to go and do their visiting student researchship. So make sure that you know where it is you want to go. The minimum length of time is 3 months, although I will double check that after this webinar. So if you want extra confirmation, do write in. But typically we would look for the maximum amount of time to be around an academic year, if not slightly longer. So it's sort of in that 9-10 month range. In terms of what you would need from the university, you would need a letter of invitation. If you can't secure that in time for the deadline, evidence of contact with the university. So maybe an email chain with them or a letter that isn't quite an official letter of invitation, but something that proves the university has acknowledged that you've reached out and that you're interested in doing a visiting student researchership with them. But ideally, what we would have is a letter of invitation from the university saying, this student reached out, we're really excited to have them. We expect they will be here from this date to this date, that kind of thing.
Great. Thanks, Sam. And again, a question for you, Sam. To what extent is AI used to inform any selection decisions?
Our selection decisions are completely human. So all of the applications are read by people. Applications are read by staff at the US UK Fulbright Commission, as well as our alumni who we send applications to based on academic fit. So your applications are read both holistically by members of staff and for academic viability by people who have worked in those fields. So our alumni panelists come from the same field that you are applying in, and they will let us know about the academic side of your application, and we will be reading the rest of the application as well. But in all cases, it is people reading these applications. There are no automated processes that go in at any stage of the commission's review of applications.
Thanks. So this is a question for Roa. Did you apply for the same course across all the 4 universities that you referenced in your application?
Sorry, I didn't realize I was on mute. I said no. I applied. So I think when I applied to Princeton too, and I think that they call it like a Master's in Public Affairs. But aside from that, all the other universities I applied to were a Master's in Public Policy. Um, I think like I've spoken to like some friends who are like, well, some of my classmates who, when they did apply, um, they applied to like the same, like a variation of the same course. So I think like there are some universities will call like the same, essentially the same course, but just with a different name. So Master's in Public Policy, like at Harvard, could be a Master's in Public Affairs at Princeton. So just to like be aware of that and looking into it and see, I think you can also see like what the curriculum is like and how it ties to your research interests if it covers like the things that you're interested in studying and being a part of.
Thank you. Let's see. We have a question about recommenders, the people who write your letters of reference. Maybe Tia and Ro, if you remember who you asked, maybe you can speak to why you chose to ask them to write your letters of recommendation. And then if Sam, if you have anything to add.
Yeah, I'm happy to answer that question. So when I applied, I think it was 3 letters of recommendations that you needed. So I chose 2 professional and 1 academic, especially because I'd been working for 5 years already. So I chose like 2 very close supervisors who'd observed like my work like super very closely, so were able to speak um like on my performance and like my achievements. And I think they had like because they'd worked with me so very closely and know me quite well. I sort of I think they were just able to give like examples that maybe others who wouldn't have been able to. And then I chose my 1 academic because I think we had to choose 1 academic, and I just chose like a physiology professor that I worked very closely with on some research during my undergrad. So I think I would just recommend choosing people who know you quite well, who can, apart from just saying that you're amazing, can actually give examples as to like why you are that way, because they obviously know you quite well and have observed your work and yeah.
Yeah, I don't have too much more to add. My three were all academic references from my undergrad program. One of them was my personal tutor who my program was very small, so I had good connections with everyone and had kept up those conversations, even though it was like 5 years post me graduating. So yeah, I think just echoes Ro's point that it should be people that know you and know your skills and that you have worked with before. Yeah, I don't think I have anything more to add. I can't remember why I didn't choose somebody from work, like a professional reference. But yeah, I guess it shows that we've had different experiences and both were fine.
Yeah, and maybe Sam, along those same lines, we've had a few people wondering if they're applying at an older age and maybe haven't even been to university in 20 years, say, what should their references look like at that point?
Yeah, I mean, we support people from all career stages, and there is no expectation that you necessarily stayed in touch with people that taught you 10, 15, 20 years ago. And so if you aren't able to get an academic reference, that's completely okay. Um, it's more about the context in which people are able to write about you. So if all of your references are professional, perhaps letting them know that this is going to be for an academically focused program. So maybe they could talk about your research skills, your professionalism, the way that you approach that kind of work is going to be helpful, but that's more about sort of giving them the context of how they might construct a good reference. I think, although again, not a requirement, it can be helpful to have variety across your referees, so people who know you and are able to write about different strengths of yours. But again, not a requirement. It's just one way of approaching this. But to echo what both of our panelists have said in terms of picking people who are able to who know you well and are able to write about you is the crucial thing here. And they are going to need to write about you. This is a competitive process, and if someone writes, a couple of sentences or just one paragraph, it is going to, in some ways, make your application stand out less than a really than like a more detailed or a longer reference. Moreover, if you're applying through the IIE placement program, your application materials that you submit to Fulbright will normally be submitted to the universities you're applying to as well. So if your referees are writing short, maybe sort of more British employment style references, and you're in a pool with people who have written very American style references, but they're very detailed and very effusive and enthusiastic, that may be a little bit of a disadvantage. So I would encourage you when reaching out to your referees to say, like, please take the time to write something. Be thankful, be grateful to them because they are giving up their time for you. But pick people who know you well and will be able to write about you in some detail because it is an important part of the application. We're not ignoring these. We are reading everything, and they are going to help form that wider picture of who you are.
Okay. We probably only have time for only one more quick question. So I think mostly we're just kind of wondering, I mean, there's a question about CV formats. I don't know if Tia and Roa, you remember what kind of information you listed on your CV for a Fulbright award because it is something a little bit different than, applying for a job or a university even. So if you have any tips on that, I think that'd be appreciated.
Yeah, I think a brief answer on that is research focused. Even if you don't have specific, like I had never
Mhm.
published an academic journal article, for example, but in my CV I made sure to get across that I had done research professionally. And even if you haven't done that, you will have done research in your undergrad. So just emphasize those research skills. And my CV was structured more as an academic CV. And like I said before, I had support on that. I don't know if that's a specific requirement. It was just the approach I took. But yeah, I think generally emphasize those research skills in your CV.
Yeah, one thing I'll add is that I think my CV for applying for the Fulbright was 2 pages long. And which are like when if I were to apply, like I'm applying for jobs and like internships now, and I'm just keeping them to 1 page. So I can like you can go for a longer CV, and I kind of highlighted. I also used my CV as like not just like a tick box activity, but also like another component to my application where I wanted it to highlight things that you wouldn't see on my essays. So things like awards, like voluntary work that I'd done, to just give like a more holistic picture of like who I am as a person. Yeah.
I would also emphasize readability. I think it's really tempting, especially while you're at university and if you're someone who's involved in lots of societies and you're doing volunteering work and you've got all of these things that you're involved in, just to cram it all in. And if the formatting is messy and hard to read, it's hard to take in the impact of each of those things. But if you're really focusing on, even if it means cutting a couple of things, but getting those core things in there, like those awards, like those research skills, like things that round out who you are as a person, and you're making sure that it's easy for whoever's reading the application to know who you are and what it is that you do and why those things are going to help you. That's going to, I think, improve your CV more than making sure it's following a specific format or um, sticking to like a certain industry way of doing something. I think that readability and making sure you're like prioritizing the right things is going to help a lot. I think you're right, Abby. I think that's probably all we
Yeah.
have time for questions wise. We'd welcome any questions that we haven't got to the inbox. That's Fulbright programs at fulbright.org.uk. But other than that, all that remains me to do is say a huge thank you to Tia and Roa for taking the time out of their days to join us and to share their advice with you. I think they've shared some really valuable advice. So please take that on board when you're making your applications. And we're really looking forward to reading your applications in May and June this year. So make sure to get those in and good luck.
Thanks.